Gentlemen, our fourth speaker today recently has been reflecting upon a simpler time of life, days filled with freedom, autonomy, and creativity, a time that portended new and adventurous possibilities. A native of Winter Park, his speech is titled, My Generation. Please join me in welcoming to the lectern Toastmaster Mark Shear.
How many of you were here just a few weeks ago when Toastmaster Amy White gave some GOAT table topics on words and phrases used by millennials and Gen Zers? No cap. They were fire. It was lit. Actually, I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But isn't it crazy the differences between one generation and the next? How many of you, along with Toastmaster Roy Shear, came from the silent generation? Toastmaster Shear, make note. All right, how many of you were from the groovy baby boomers? A few of you in the room, all right. Tech-savvy millennials, lives completely mediated by the screen. Or how about the passionate Gen Zers? Use of social media is dope. Me? I'm a Gen Xer. Yeah. Man, dude, it has been rad. Yeah. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and guests. This morning I am going to share with you what it was like growing up as a Gen Xer right here in Winter Park. First, we were wildly independent. We had a tremendous amount of freedom and autonomy. We were referred to as the latchkey generation. Why? Because it was total hands-off upbringing. Our parents had zero clue what we were up to, thankfully. And as the youngest of four, I quickly found out how not to get caught. And can you imagine being a third or fourth grader, leaving your house in the morning time when it was dark, getting on your bike by yourself, riding 2 or 3 miles up to Audubon Park Elementary School? There were no tracking devices, no cell phones, and the only time that I had to be home was at dinner time, about when the sun went down. My mom and dad didn't have to worry about kids getting snatched. In fact, for the most part, everything was going to be okay. But what happens when you have that much time on your hands? You get into a little mischief. Sometimes that caught up to us. My grandparents, they lived in Altamont Springs in what is now known as Crane's Roost, and I would play outside every weekend at their house. And one afternoon, I moseyed on over to the neighbor's house, and on the patio was a box of matches. I picked those boxes of matches up, walked out into the fields of Crane's Roost, and there was a foxhole big enough for me to crawl into. And I started lighting the grass. And all of a sudden, the fire started leaching over the foxhole. And before I knew it, an absolute blazing wildfire cleared the entire path of Crane's Roost. And who would have ever thunk that Mark Shear would have cleared the pathway for the development of the Altamont Mall? Go figure. Second, we were an ingenious group of kids. There was no Snapchat, right? There was no Xbox. And we spent all of our time playing outside. It was crazy. I grew up on Lake Virginia, and one of our favorite things to do was to play boat dock tag. Have you guys ever heard of that? No. Play tag on top of the boat dock, under the boat dock, and we would play from the time the sun came up until well into the nighttime, not thinking twice about the massive gators that once inhabited the Winter Park chain of lakes. Sometimes we would sneak out of the house at nighttime, scrounge up 75 cents, and we would go up to the local convenience store and we would buy a 6-pack of Black Label. And we would bring it back home, we would put it on our surfboards, and we would paddle out in the middle of the night over to the Rollins College ski ramp. And we would drink beer out on the ramp. And we learned how to actually slide on your feet down the ramp. And one day, one of my buddies completely took my legs out, and I just smashed my chin. It just completely put a gaping wound in my chin. Also, unlike the transportation services that parents provide children today, we had to be creative. And we discovered that you could take a snapper riding lawnmower, and it became our transportation of choice around town. We also learned that you could tie a ski rope to the back of that thing, and we took skateboarding to the next level all around the neighborhood. So third, we had a certain understanding of what was right and what was wrong. And if you didn't, you learned quickly. I had an English teacher named Mrs. Gibson. She had eyes in the back of her head, and one day I thought she wasn't looking. I took a pencil and I flicked it up into the ceiling, hoping that it would stick. Man, it stuck. And before I knew it, she hit me so hard in the back of my head, my face, it completely just bounced off the desk in front of me. Mark, make note to self, don't do that again. And sometimes other people had a hard time learning their lessons, right? When I was growing up, there were no bullies in middle school or high school. And if somebody did decide to pick on some little guy, a group of us, we'd take that little punk outside and we'd show him a world of hurt. And he quickly learned to never do that again. And if you had a beef with someone, you didn't have to worry about getting knifed or getting shot full of holes. It was just common knowledge that you were going to meet outside, and the whole school knew about it, and you were going to duke it out. And I tell you what, we got in scraps all the time, but what was cool about it? We ended up most often being better friends for it. In closing, looking back, freedom we had made us stronger. The creativity, right, and the quick learning made us better. I once read a quote, and it pretty much summed up the playground of a Gen Xer. It read, "In case of an injury, stop crying, walk it off, blow on it, you're fine, because nobody gives a rat anyways." All right? Ladies and gentlemen, growing up as a Gen Xer was absolutely incredible. And I am proud and thankful that I was able to grow up in that generation. Fellow Toastmasters.